show. She is Dr. Lorena Newsom. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just to give you a brief synopsis on how I met Dr. Newsom, we are actually neighbors in the same community. And she drove by my house, seeing my roommate and said, "Hey, do you know anyone that does hair?" So it all began from that point, and it's been a great relationship. I look forward to just connecting more with you and learning from you, and all of that. So welcome to the show, Lorena. You want to go ahead and give our audience a brief background of your history, your journey?
Sure. Thank you so much, Paulette, for having me. I'm excited to be on the show today, and I'm excited for all of the topics that we're going to be discussing today. So, my name is Lorena Newsom, and I am a dean at a community college up in the high desert. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I went to Crenshaw High School, and very local to Los Angeles. And,
The hood.
and so I'm in the high desert, and I'm in a community that is similar to the community that I lived in LA. And I'm really hoping, that I can use education and my platform as a dean and also an educator to just empower and inspire the community. I have a faculty experience. And so prior to coming up to the high desert, I was a part-time professor as well as an administrator in education. And so I have a lot, Paulette, so you could tell me if there's anything specific you want me to get into. But now that I'm here, I'm hoping that we can join forces, and I'm hoping that we can really make a difference up in the high desert.
Oh, awesome. That is so awesome. And honestly, I think that we can, because, there's not a lot of platforms where we can reach really like the grassroots. This show is designed to reach the everyday person. You don't have to be a celebrity, or you just need to do something that can inspire somebody. And I realize that that is something that we lack. We don't talk enough about, what it is that we do, how we got to where we are, our struggles along our path. And even though we had struggles, we still made it. We completed those goals. And so that's an inspiration to people that are thinking about doing something, or have an idea, or not sure. It just gives them some sort of guide. So congratulations to all your accomplishments. And I know that from this point, I'd love to have you back on the show, I know there's so many other things that we're going to be talking about in the future. But as we get going today, I do have some questions for you. And one is, what do you see in our education system that really sealed the deal for you to be an educator?
Okay, so just coming from, Los Angeles or South Central, growing up, as a millennial, and not naming any of the other, secondary schools that I attended, college was really a struggle for me, and it was a challenge for me. There was a time where I attended schools and we didn't have books. The schools couldn't afford books. There was no funding, and my real experience with having to learn and try and struggle really didn't happen until I got to college. And so I realized that students that are in low income communities or disadvantaged communities, underserved, urban, whatever you want to call it, sometimes we're behind the 8 ball. If we don't have programs like AVID or TRIO or, athletics that really push and promote education, sometimes, when we get to college, or just when we get into the real world, we're at a disadvantage, specifically if our parents weren't educated or we don't have somebody in our family that was educated. So for example, I was a first generation college student, right? Come from a 7 people household. My mom has 5 children. At one time, we were in a single income household, right? Because someone has to work and someone else has to, tend to the
Right,
children's.
right,
And so, you know, just coming from that environment, catching the bus from Normandy to Western to 39th and Crenshaw to, just navigating all the different territories you got to go through before you get from one location to the others, getting home, from the bus, stop safely, kind of being a latchkey kid,
mhm,
having to do your homework, having to make sure you get all your stuff done. It's I would say it's a little bit unfair because only the people in those communities that either persevere or have grit or somebody told them that they can do it,
right, right,
that's the only way that it can happen. And well, maybe there are other ways. So I won't be so strong in my opinion about that, but I would just say it's easier. So for me, I just said, oh, I gotta going to college was the only way I could get out, like academics.
right,
You know, what can I learn? Where can I go? I
right,
went to college and stayed in the dorms to leave home, to get out of my house, right?
right,
And so I
right,
was just like, how can I get out of
right.
this? And so I would literally get on the bus on Manchester and Normandy, catch the bus right down Manchester to Loyola Marymount University. I traveled through 3 different neighborhoods and I
Wow,
ended up by the beach somewhere, in a whole nother demographic, and that just really opened my eyes, being able to travel on that bus, be safe, and see that people lived differently in different areas. And
right,
so from there, I started to, like as a part-time job when I was in college or undergrad, I started to tutor and I started to teach in Compton, and other school districts that were low income or urban, just like the ones that I came from. And that's actually how I entered education, because my goal originally was to be an MD and to go to medical school, but I ended up tutoring and working in programs that serve the youth, and I ended up in the path that I'm on today.
wow. So you actually well, in one word, you love what you do. I mean, that's what I hear. And that you just, there is a need in the community. And I hear that a lot from people that I have conversations with, that really they wanted to get out. And so I think that, there that shows that there is a core problem in like urban communities. Why do we want to leave a place that, we grew up and that wouldn't pretty much nurtured us, but because it doesn't have those fundamental uh, channels that are available in other communities as it relates to education, there is a disadvantage. And so I totally get it, you know, and I think that, to see that as a young person, to see that at a young point in your life, that's awesome, and to actually, do something about it, because wow, we can just write a list of how many things that need attention. They need, to be handled. And they just kind of get swept under the bus because something else, supersedes that. So thank you. Wow. Wow. So moving right along, in your opinion, what has happened to our education system in the past 10 to 20 years as technology um, has increased? Do you think the education has become political? That's the second part of the question, but first part,
Definitely, definitely political, definitely antiquated.
mhm,
Technology is evolving so quickly. It
yes,
really is hard to keep up with all of the changes in technology. And then if you're an instructor or a teacher, you teach at an elementary or a high school or even a college, you go to school and you're trained one way, and by the time you get out in 4 years, there's a new platform. There's so for example, I started, well, no, I won't use that example, but 10 years ago, we didn't have Instagram, right?
mhm,
So just imagine the progress in 10 years for Instagram. People have business models on there, they're
right,
streaming content, they're designing behind the scenes, doing web design, things that people go to college for. Little kids and teenagers are learning how to do. YouTube, you have 4-year-olds, millions of dollars making contents, playing with dolls. I just think formal education as it existed when I was growing up and when you were coming up is just not, it's just not that way anymore. And it kind of sucks for the system. But if we don't find a way to either get ahead of technology or be innovative or capture the young minds for the youth, you know, I don't know how long the systems are going to be able to survive and thrive. Even right now in the pandemic, some students stopped going to college. They focused on work, they focusing on family, they're doubling up in their living situations so that they can save money. They're going to find a trade, they're
mhm,
getting more into entrepreneurship, which is great. um, but the value of education, it used to be, when I was coming up, you got to get your degree,
mhm,
to get a job. And, that was kind of the message that was pushed. But now we see entertainers, we see athletes, we see YouTube stars, we see entrepreneurs. We have 15-year-olds making lip gloss and lipstick and doing hair and making wigs and, doing, so it's really, so from that standpoint, it's inspiring. And I love to see the youth being creative and finding a way to better their means and their situation. And so, there's going to be duality, or I guess polar opposites. And so on one end, everybody's not a business person and everybody's not an entrepreneur.
right,
And so I'm not like saying that, but I think that education, the system, we're going to have to keep up. We're going to have to make sure the trainers that are training the teachers and instructors are state of the art instruction. Whatever is coming out that's cutting edge, we're sending
right,
them to get professional development. We're allowing them to travel. We're giving them time for self
mhm,
and professional development. So many times in so many organizations and platforms, it's like, okay, you were trained, so you just get in there and you get going. But people need to be developed. And
yeah,
so what I see in the educational system sometimes is that we don't always invest in our people. And there's burnout, and we expect them to use their own private time to catch themselves up. And I don't always think that that's fair. I think that we should give our folks that we hire time to develop, time for professional development, and time to, assess the growth curve. Because sometimes when you're in it, you don't have a realistic perspective about how antiquated things are, or what you learned a month ago or 2 months ago is different
mhm,
now. So things are changing and evolving. And at one point it was, about the dollar,
right,
federal student loans,
mhm,
without naming Sally Mae and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and all, the interest rates, students going to college and getting in debt, defaulting on loans. And then
right,
you get all of these degrees like I have, and you have a ton of debt, and you got to work for another 30 years
to
to
pay it
pay it
off,
off. And there are so many students, they would rather have the Charger, the Dodge Charger, the GT debt than a piece of paper, right?
mhm,
They can see that, and they're getting in the car and they're riding around, and they're getting the attention. And sometimes that's more rewarding because you can see it tangible. It's right now, as opposed to I'm sacrificing
gotta
for the next
wait,
4 years, and I don't really know if it's going to pay off. And we've heard this before. Not all degrees are going to be degrees that land you a high
Mm.
paying job. And
Mhm.
so, imagine being 17 or 18, being forced to pick a program at a college, and you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You don't know if that program is actually going to get you a job that's going to let you take care of yourself, take care of your family, make some children, live
Mhm.
the life that you want to live. And so, it has gotten fairly political, and I think that people have caught on, and I think that that's why we are seeing the boom in entrepreneurship and leadership, and people are circumventing, they're finding a way to get where they need to get without going through this formal process that has been ingrained for so many of us.
Yes, I totally agree. I would say from my generation, that was the norm. You go to school, either a university or you go to a trade school, and you learn, you get your degree and you go work a job. And my own personal experience, I went to a junior college and I went to beauty school and I got my license, realizing that at that time, was that business going to sustain me, for 30, 40 years? And versus, and so just to correlate the two, the difference is whether if you have, a service type position, or if you invest in a product, you make something, like you said, the internet and the technology has allowed even the youngest to be entrepreneurs. And so when you weigh that against education, I still believe in education. I think that, you can never learn enough. There's always something new to learn. Um, but again, like I come from like a generation who believed in school. Um, I had a great grandmother who graduated from USC in the 1930s, which that's
Oh,
a
wow.
whole nother story. Um,
Well, I'm a Trojan, so.
oh, awesome. Well, there you go. And so that was always embedded in me as a young child: education, education, education. But given, the personality, you have to be ready for that dedication. You really do. And so for me, as you know, I am pursuing my bachelor's. Of course, I should have done this years ago. And I go through the thought process, was I really ready for this dedication? And I
You
wasn't.
mean then or you mean now?
I mean, then I
Okay.
wasn't ready
Okay.
because I was the party girl, going to clubs. I was
Which
a
is different because I
hairstylist.
just started that. I just started that in my 20s. My friends would call me a grandma. They said I didn't like to have any fun, and I didn't want to go out because I was so concerned about studying. So it's the reverse for
Yeah,
me.
I was total, after high school, I went to like a prep school, and honestly, people that know me, it was 1% African American. So I was the only Black child in all of my classes, all 4 years. After that, I think it wasn't really a head trip like now I think it was, but back then I didn't realize how the magnitude of that. And going straight into college, I really just wanted to get out there, have fun, go to clubs, meet celebrities, and all of that craziness, right? But I was a hairstylist, and I was making like, five 500 to 1,000 a day. And for a young person, it's like,
Right.
oh, what do I need to go to school for? This
Right.
is the life. But then realizing, oh, once I landed a job, I was able to get trained as if I was in a college. because it was environmental, and it was something that, I just learned so much. Now on this end, I realize the value of the education, because I would have made so much more money during that time. And so